In a world filled with sin and with death, it's waiting the just judgment of God. Is it possible for us to walk closely with the Lord and enter eternal life? That question gets answered early in the Bible, in Genesis chapter 5, in just a few brief verses about a man named Enoch. In Genesis chapter 5 is in between Adam and Eve's tragic fall into sin in the garden and the penalty for sin, which is death. Then on the other side, you have God's judgment on the world in the form of a flood. But even within chapter 5 itself, the few verses about Enoch are surrounded by death. 8 times we see the same thing happen, that a man is born, he fathers a son, and then he dies. But the 7th one in the list, that's Enoch, he breaks the pattern. He doesn't die. He's taken right up into heaven. Why does this happen? Why doesn't Enoch die? Well, 2 times in the chapter, we read that Enoch walked with God. The metaphor communicates walking in God's path, moving in God's direction, keeping in step with God's ways. It actually also is meant to communicate personal communion and was used by the minor prophets to describe the priests who would enter into the Holy of Holies and they would speak directly with God. So in a world filled with death, walking with God is the way to life. That's what we read in chapter 5 of Genesis. In the New Testament, he's mentioned twice. One of those is in Hebrews chapter 11, verses 5 and 6. This is what we read. By faith, Enoch was taken up so that he should not see death, and he was not found because God had taken him. Now, before he was taken, he was commended as having pleased God. And without faith, it is impossible to please him. For whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him. That a close walk with God is the fruit of God-pleasing faith. Because without faith, it's impossible to please God. That Enoch's close walk with God was evidence that he took God at his word and trusted in his promises. And it's no different for us. That in a world filled with death, in a world filled with sin, in a world that's waiting the judgment of God, that we walk closely with the Lord by taking God at his word and clinging to the promise that all those who trust in Jesus Christ shall never perish and enter eternal life.